questo appuntamento dedicato negli approfondimenti sul tema della privacy applicata al mondo delle criptovalute, blockchain e in generale al rapporto che abbiamo come cittadini nella società che ci circonda, con un approfondimento e due special guest, Rose O'Leary, I say properly, che è a tutti gli effetti fondatrice della filosofia lunarpunk, evoluzione del pensiero che viene dagli anni '80 del mondo cyberpunk, relativamente a come la crittografia può cambiare il rapporto di forza che c'è tra e soprattutto il rapporto di libertà che c'è tra noi come cittadini e individui e la società che ci circonda. Quindi come la privacy permetta di garantire a noi stessi maggiori diritti, autonomia e quindi di conseguenza libertà nella massima espressione dei diritti fondamentali. E con Daniele Monteleone, esponente già da molto tempo del mondo blockchain, con esperienze nel mondo Bitcoin private, nonché vecchi passati trascorsi nel mondo del partito pirata, quindi azione politica applicata nell'intersezione tra le tecnologie e la società dell'informazione. In questa sessione vogliamo intervenire per guardare a quelli che sono le problematiche che ci troviamo ad affrontare in questa fase di digitalizzazione della moneta, perché a tutti gli effetti oggi siamo in una fase in cui, al netto della ubriacatura speculativa del mondo delle cryptocurrency, ci troviamo di fronte a una dinamica sempre più pervasiva di utilizzo di denaro digitale e andiamo verso una cashless society. La cashless society è a tutti gli effetti una società in cui l'uso del denaro contante o della equivalente alternativa digitale non permette più di poter avere degli spazi di libertà, di non tracciabilità. Poi avremo un approfondimento in particolare sul progetto di DarkFi, di cui Rose è spokesperson, un progetto molto ambizioso e oltre che tecnicamente molto complesso. Personalmente io sono tra i fondatori di questo spazio, mi occupo di crittografia e tutela della privacy possiamo dire dal 97, quindi il movimento cyberpunk l'ho frequentato before it was cool, come si suol dire, e vengo fresco da 3 settimane in Cina. Sono tornato lunedì dopo 3 settimane in Cina, dove andare dallo street food che ti griglia 2 cavallette con lo spiedo porta a dover fare un pagamento con WeChat Pay o con Alipay tramite un QR code e la non accettazione del denaro contante. Quando ho acquistato le cavallette gli ho proposto i miei 10 yuan, ma guardato tipo: ma non ce l'avevi Alipay o WeChat Pay? WeChat Pay non ho potuto farlo perché da straniero in Cina la real name policy mi impediva di effettuare una verifica, cioè io non avevo accesso al sistema transazionale per comprare gli spiedini di cavallette perché non avevo modo di seguire la Chinese real name policy di WeChat. Alipay è stato più flessibile, con Alipay siamo riusciti a effettuare questa transazione. Questo è un esempio molto piccolo di vita vissuta di un paese che è certamente lontano dalle libertà fondamentali a cui siamo abituati in Occidente in generale, dove i diritti fondamentali sono rafforzati, ma sono quei piccoli esempi che ci portano a dire che dove non si ha la libertà e l'autonomia di poter esprimere una transazione digitale senza aver fatto disclosure della propria identità, quindi con chi sto avendo una relazione che abbia poi un sottostante a carattere economico di scambio di valore, questo porta a una società che è degna della Cina. E questa esperienza fatta a titolo personale ha veramente un carattere significativo. E credo sia opportuna una introduzione alle privacy coin, se Daniele può
scusami, io non ho detto niente anche del posto, se vuoi.
Effettivamente.
Io ho parlato Unchained Blockchain, che è il meetup, è il sistema che ci permette di organizzare gli incontri. Però di questo posto è meglio che parli tu.
Sì, Open Space, che è il luogo in cui ci troviamo, è una iniziativa particolarmente ambiziosa dal punto di vista filosofico e di criterio di creare uno spazio aperto e libero per la condivisione di conoscenza, posizionato dove sappiamo dietro l'edificio Lambrate, davanti al Politecnico di Milano, che permetta di fare knowledge sharing, accrescimento culturale nella materia digitale, anche nel pensiero della controcultura digitale, estremamente libero, e la libertà e la autodefinizione di che cosa viene fatto all'interno di Open Space in quanto hackerspace a Milano è ciò che lo connota. Nasce come un'iniziativa, uno sforzo anche economico-finanziario di una decina di persone con cui abbiamo rilevato questo spazio, ristrutturato questo spazio, e stiamo dando vita anche tramite la creazione di ovviamente tutto questo in raccordo con il mondo dell'associativismo formale e informale attorno alle community che si occupano, si preoccupano, si interessano, si divertano di quello che è l'impatto della tecnologia sulla società che ci circonda. La caratteristica di libertà verrà ancora più enfatizzata, spoiler ma neanche tanto spoiler, dalla governance di questo spazio, che verrà gestita interamente tramite una DAO, e quindi saranno i partecipanti stessi dello spazio, a tutti gli effetti tutto e per tutto membri della costituenda associazione, a determinare quali tipologie di workshop, quali tipologie di eventi, quali tipologie di regole di convivenza comune saranno proprio di questo spazio aperto 24/7 a Milano sulla falsariga e l'ispirazione filosofica che ci porta il Noise Bridge di San Francisco, un luogo dove un hackerspace a San Francisco in zona Mission Street, dove ogni volta che ci si va la prima volta ti viene data la chiave, puoi entrare quando vuoi e venire quando vuoi. Questo spirito è lo stesso spirito che vogliamo portare, che in una capitale della cultura digitale che è Milano se ne sente assolutamente la mancanza, è il gap che vogliamo colmare, e qui ovviamente iniziano ad esserci i primi incontri, i primi incroci proprio delle comunità, le community, quella del blockchain Milano, che collaborazioni anche con l'associazione Copernicani e con tante altre realtà che vengono qui per poter fare liberamente knowledge sharing su temi progressisti legati alla tecnologia, anche soltanto for fun, perché vivere il rapporto tra tecnologia e società, anche questo viene. Forse mi sono un po' prolungato troppo.
No, va bene.
Volevo dare lo spirito di quello che non sono solo quattro mura, ma è un progetto con una visione libertaria, mi verrebbe da dire in una chiave assolutamente positivista, anarchica, nella libertà di definizione di quello che sarà questo spazio, di quello che rappresenterà per la città e per le comunità che lo vivranno. Dare spazio adesso a Daniele Monteleone per una introduzione di quello che è il mondo legato alle privacy coin.
Grazie Fabio. Buongiorno a tutti. Benissimo, allora metto di lato così si vede qualcosa. La mia sarà un'introduzione molto veloce. Preferite in italiano o in inglese? Quanti capiscono l'inglese dell'audience?
The majority.
Tutti l'italiano? Di meno, ok. Penso che faccio inglese. Ok, I switch it to English. Okay. So, what is blockchain? What is privacy coin? Why we need it? Okay. Don't mind about Bitcoin private. I'm not here to talk about that. let's say that this is a it was a project that had a good, let's say, sign from the community that was eager to understand, to have some tools, and this is why we are moving forward to technologies much more advanced and much more, let's say, strong. And this is what Rose will show today. But let's go back to the purpose of this speech. I want to make a little resume about blockchain. Blockchain, we have, you can imagine like a ledger, a book with many transactions registered on it. And for each page of this book, we can call it a block. No, it's called a block. It's a digital book, of course. But the transactions are just easy. The seller, the recipient, and the amount and the signature. Easy. Any block has in its header. First, any block has its fingerprint and a hash code that resumes the entire transactions in it. And the next block keeps in the header the hash of the previous block. So all these blocks are unchangeable, not anti-tamper. Nobody can tamper them, nobody can change them, and this ensure very reliability on the content. This is the blockchain, very in a few words. There is a public key and a private key. Anyone owns a key pair in its wallet. So basically the wallet is just a signature system that demonstrates to the general public that the owner of the public key is the one that is signing, and he possesses the private key, of course, and can be only him, because the knowledge of the public key cannot give the access to the private key. So in this way, we can guarantee to anyone that only him can spend its own assets. There are many ways to protect its own wallet, and the way it made usually is putting it outside the network. Some people call it cold storage. And then they took out the hard disk from the computer and they put somewhere else, or they keep in other wallets to be more safe. Some people printed some paper wallets and that are just QR code encrypted with a key pair, with some eventually with some password, and etc. So, of course, if I have a lot of money on my mobile phone and it's not protected, it's not encrypted, and some hacker enters into it, maybe it can still steal my cryptos. So, now that we have our wallet well protected, we know how to do it, and now we can go shopping with our Bitcoin, right? But this is the problem. The problem is that the Bitcoin protocol, like 99% of the cryptocurrencies use it in the adopted worldwide, they have transparent transactions. So the transactions are unclear. And this means that it's very easy to anyone to understand which is the balance of that wallet. So it's not so easy, but it is possible. And about some insights, would you feel safe if you go around traveling around the world, knowing that somebody knows that you have in your pocket $10,000, $100,000, you know, or 10 million? No, this is not probably the way you want. And more than this, it's not only imagine that you go to the grocery or you buy some food. The transaction that you make allows the recipient to know what is the address coming from that. And so he can check the balance of that address, and in very few algorithmic steps, it can know exactly how much money you have. And more is even from the government, because I have some friends that work in agencies, and they told me that they are capable to identify address from Bitcoin address with a score that goes from 60%, from 30% up to 60%. And with the new regulations, I'm pretty sure that they can get even 90% of score. So this means that there is no privacy, no liberty for anyone. The problem is that not only some authorities that want to go against some terrorist, whatever, drug, or whatever they claim, but the point is that if they do this, also evil, people with bad intention can do this. And this is not good for the honest citizens. More than this, we have other problems, because in some countries the crypto are banned. In other countries you are under control already. Talking about China, where everything you cannot move without being controlled. Other countries even forbid women to possess bank accounts or to in control of money. This is still this. We have Africa, where 60% of people do not have access to bank services, but 90% of these people have a smartphone. So they can install a Bitcoin wallet and use it, so they can have access to the crypto services. Here comes the privacy component. So to protect people, there are some algorithms that, some techniques, let's say, that allow to have very strong encrypted transactions to avoid to anyone to know what's inside that transaction, except the two counterparts. And this is actually interesting, because with these algorithms, anyone can validate that the transaction is legit, but only the two counterparts can understand what's inside. And I don't go in the details of the differences between ring signatures of Monero and zero knowledge proof of Zcash, or eventually DAC5 that was Renaissance. One last word about Lightning Network, because Lightning Network claims to be, a way to let Bitcoin mass adopted, because transactions are very cheap and you have a very good privacy on it. But again, maybe transactions are cheap, that's for sure, but you don't have real privacy, because the routing system, that again is controlled by very few service providers, they can actually know your address, your IP address, and they can easily identify you or the wallet this transaction are coming from. Okay. So there is not a strong privacy in Lightning Network, despite what they are saying. I don't want to enter into details of atomic swap, but what you have to understand is that together with these technologies, we talk about trustless concept. When we are grown, everybody teach us that faith, no, is important. You have to trust, you have to have faith, but what we really aim is trustless. So we have faith in mathematics, we have faith in cryptography, and this is what we need. So we don't need to trust to middlemen like banks to make a transaction from one person to another. Also because, as we often are demonstrated, banks decide to stop suddenly what we are doing. When we were buying this place, and we bought this place in Bitcoin, just to mention, we had to fight with banks. They were stopping us because we were not nice to them. So, because we had to, in some way, at the end, move to the old, to the financial system, because the recipient was a normal, person who just wanted the fiat. And for this, banks were deciding, oh no, you cannot do this. Okay, so we decided. But there is no law. Bitcoin is illegally, is completely illegal in Italy. There are laws that is regulated. Is that we are all compliant, but they decide. They decide that it's up to us. So that's why we want not to trust in someone to our financial interest, but we want to rely just on the technology. And this is a final statement mentioned from Benjamin Franklin that that is what is happening right now. People is giving up their privacy, their information, they are giving up everything because someone is promising, to fight the terrorism, to fight to protect them, But Benjamin Franklin was saying that who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Detto in italiano, chi rinuncia alla propria libertà per avere maggiore protezione alla fine perderà sia la libertà sia la protezione. E questo è tutto. Grazie. Lascio la parola a Rose, anzi se
please. Now we welcome Rose to bring us I would say the philosophical nature of the Dark File project and the lunar punk philosophy itself, starting also from a perspective of someone that doesn't even know what a cyberpunk movement is or crypto war has been. So really introduce us to the concept and how those are going to change our society and where we also as a group need to bring support.
Sure.
Drink this summer.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm just going to see if what happens when I try to remove these to. Oh,
yeah, no, they're on the.
they're fixed on the. Okay.
Here is this touch. No.
to the nice intro. I'm really happy to be here in the lab in this lovely hackerspace. And congratulations to everyone for putting that together. So this talk has three parts. First, I'm going to talk about a little bit the kind of thesis behind DarkFi, which is like a market analysis, which we call Lunarpunk. Then I will talk a little bit about, or reflect on, why, like what is the kind of deeper motivation here, and what's driving this, what's driving us toward these processes. And then finally, I will end by talking about DarkFi on the technical level. I haven't written this talk for the very, very beginner, so I don't spend long situating Lunarpunk in relation to other punks, but I will try my best to simplify it, and very happy to discuss with any questions. Feel free to interrupt me. We don't have to wait until the end. Just directly ask. So this is a diagram that illustrates a feedback loop between surveillance and anonymity. So what we've seen in the past couple of years, and this is something that anyone working in cryptography will be intimately familiar with, is that there is a kind of cat and mouse game that unfolds between increasing anonymity through advances in cryptography and increased surveillance through advances in surveillance mechanisms. Recently, increasingly that is AI driven and etc. So cryptography and working in cryptography is very much this kind of war of attrition where both spheres are kind of escalating together. There's a mutual co-development of these two worlds, where surveillance is basically predicated or structured on control, whereas anonymity is about freedom. So these two processes are relevant to crypto. They kind of map onto the crypto industry in this decisive way of what we call RegFi and DarkFi. So RegFi is the side of crypto that increasingly blends into the surveillance apparatus. So it's crypto that is like, so you can imagine these surveillance and anonymity are kind of like forces that like compel crypto industry into them. So this is like the surveillance-based crypto, and DarkFi, what we call DarkFi, is crypto that is based on anonymity and on freedom. And as we can see, what this image is trying to describe is that these two spheres are increasingly kind of decoupling and creating two distinct worlds. So in crypto, we often talk about things in terms of anti-fragility. So it's a term that's used a lot to describe Bitcoin, for example. Bitcoin is often described as anti-fragile money. But when you look at crypto, there's actually a spectrum of fragility and anti-fragility, where some projects are more anti-fragile than others, and this has a connection to anonymity, where anonymous systems have higher anti-fragility than transparent systems. You can't, unfortunately, this diagram is kind of cropped, but that's just labelled anti-fragile, and this one is labelled fragile. So this image is describing the kind of, it's diagramming the impact of fragile and anti-fragile systems, where an anti-fragile system is something that actually grows and benefits from conflict and adversarial conditions. Whereas fragile systems, they have the opposite dynamic. They break when they're under attack. So that's what this positive convexity is trying to illustrate, that growing from adversarial conditions, whereas this negative convexity is the opposite effect of fragility. So, like, what I will just go back quickly. What we can notice about this graph is that the relationship between the x and the y-axis is non-linear. It's like there's this like kind of almost exponential curve that's happening. So to kind of explain a little bit more detail then about what is it fine?
No, I mean, if you reduce the screen, people may see all the words. Actually, yes, like. You know, just for because.
Yeah, I don't know why.
It's my suggestion. I don't know.
Okay, sure.
Does that help?
It's just a trick in order, you know, understand.
Yeah. Whoops, and I don't know if we can just get rid of that high side. There we go. Does that?
It's quite better now. Okay.
Is that better? I don't know. It's up to you.
Can you manage?
What do you guys think? Is that
It's
better?
okay. We understand anyhow.
Okay. We'll just go. Well, I think let's go for the other one. Just I'm trying
For the full
to.
screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to put myself in my designer's shoes, and so I know that he would probably prefer the whole image,
Okay.
even if it was cropped.
As you like.
But yes, so we're not actually missing any information here.
Yes. Anyhow, this slide may be available later.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm happy to share with anyone who wants to slides.
okay, share with our team.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
share with Daniela. Okay. So this diagram illustrates a linear relationship between users and time. So this is like, imagine a statement such as time goes on, anonymous networks acquire more and more users. So that's like a simple version of what I will argue, because I think that anti-fragility shows that this adoption curve is actually non-linear, it's close to exponential. But this is like what a linear relationship would look like if there wasn't any internal dynamics that make the adoption curve of anonymous technologies more extreme, in my view. This is what I'm going to try and explain. So we're looking for some kind of dynamic that is non-linear, that's close to exponential. So I think this quote from Jay Stark gets us a little bit closer to what we're looking for. Does anyone here know who Jay Stark is?
No, I don't know it.
No?
Never.
Very few.
Sorry.
No one knows. Okay. So have you heard of the Liberator pistol or Cody Wilson? No?
No.
So the Liberator pistol was the world's first 3D printed gun. And that was like a plastic gun. It was a single shot pistol, based off like the Liberator pistol that during the Second World War were dropped from airplanes from the Allies, some story along those lines. So basically we have 3D printers here. You can use them to create weapons. Jay Stark took the concept of 3D printing weapons and brought it to its most kind of perfect conclusion, where he designed a gun that you can build with entirely consumer hardware, very easily, readily available DIY parts, and put these designs free on the internet for anyone to use. His vision was, he called it deterrence dispersed. So it's like he wanted to provide tools that would deter people from committing violence against others. So it's like, trying like to provide these 3D printed guns as like a defensive fabric that anyone can access. Jay Stark was also killed 2 years ago in Germany, presumably as a result of providing these blueprints. So this is a quote from him. He says, "If something unfortunate happens to one individual, another individual will take his place. It's a hideout you cannot completely kill. You cut off one head, another pops off. We are impossible to stop." So this gets a little bit closer to the dynamic that I'm looking for when I'm talking about anti-fragility. It brings to mind something that a friend of mine called the law of insurgency, which is you have a situation of insurgency, a revolutionary is killed, and rather than that suppressing or being the end of the insurgency, 20 more revolutionaries show up to take her place. So that's kind of this, this anti-fragile dynamic that we're looking for.
We just add a consideration that the mentor manifest, the hacker manifesto from the 80s, have a very similar statement about you can stop one of us, but you can stop all of us.
Similar energy. So this is another kind of dynamic that again, that is backing up this statement of like anonymity is this anti-fragile mechanism. Metcalfe's law. So this law is also spoken about a lot in crypto as a way to potentially value cryptocurrency networks. So Metcalfe's law says that the value of a cryptocurrency network is equal to the number of users squared. And that's been used again to try and value Bitcoin and Ethereum, etc. According to this law, Ethereum is undervalued relative to Bitcoin. But this is like closer to the dynamic that we're looking for, because it's that exponential relationship between users and value. So again, like we're going to take this and we're going to adjust it using this. So this this is a proposed feedback that is very much inspired by the ethics of the free software movement. So free software puts the empowerment of the developer and the empowerment of the user in positive feedback with each other. So the more empowered the developer, the more empowered the user, and vice versa, and it breaks out of this exploitation dynamic that we have within proprietary software. So we kind of take that free software ethics, we append it to the Metcalfe's law, and we propose this feedback, which says that user empowerment is positively correlated with system anti-fragility. So that means the more empowered your user base, the more anti-fragile your network becomes. And this is where anonymity becomes very interesting. So let's kind of map this this theory onto a real life scenario. So let's imagine we have some kind of regulatory event inside of crypto. It's actually happening now in Europe. Just yesterday, the European Commission or Parliament voted yes to a proposal that's been long underway called MiCA, which is going to allow for, or is going to enforce KYC on self-hosted wallets. The same process is being pushed in America. So increasingly, it's getting to a stage where self-custody is either illegal or heavily regulated. So you imagine this kind of situation. What happens to transparent blockchains, where people are, vulnerably kind of sitting on-chain with these identities that are easily correlated with real-life identities and also, monetary value, etc. So what happens in a transparent system? We predict that users will exit. Users and value will kind of exit again in this non-linear way, in this exponential kind of shock event that causes a cascade of users and value from transparent systems. The kind of adverse or the inverse of this is anonymous networks. So we're kind of positioning ourselves with Dartified because we believe that with this kind of unfolding regulatory impact event, anonymous networks will actually benefit. So this is the anti-fragile curve, and you can see there's a number of steps here. First the crackdown begins. Rather than suppressing the existence of anonymous technology, it actually creates something that I call the regulation trap, which is the harder that these entities try to suppress anonymous technology, the more they justify it in a weird way. So they're actually giving power over to those anonymous technologies. A good example of this, this is a kind of a niche crypto example for those who are not following, but if anyone followed Tornado Cash, it was very interesting because Tornado Cash was sanctioned by OFAC, the American sanction body, and instead of killing Tornado Cash or making it so it didn't exist, we actually saw a wave of support from people inside of crypto who were encouraged and kind of galvanized in their support of privacy. And you had people who never before defended privacy suddenly speaking publicly about why it was important. And in the Telegram group, I was in the Telegram, you'd think that it would go quiet and people are scared, right? This OFAC sanctions. But instead it was like crazy, full of activity, people redeploying Tornado Cash on IPFS so that anyone can access it, people making decentralized RPC backends, redeploying on GitHub and various places, etc. So it actually galvanized support around Tornado Cash rather than suppressing it. So we can see, that in that way this crackdown is like vilifying and energizing to these communities. And then the final stage here in this convexity curve, we can't see it, is like actually better yield. So there's an argument, at least on DarkFi, that there's a monetary economic incentive also to migrate to these anonymous systems once we've had this mass migration of users and value. So these processes that I just described, there are kind of feedback loops integral to them. I explained a few, like anonymity surveillance, regulation trap, user empowerment system, anti-fragility, etc. There's probably more that can be argued. But this dynamic, I don't see it as like a feedback in the sense of it being like a static system, but rather something that's closer to an open spiral. So something that's like unfolding outward into something new, which kind of raises the question, like, where are we spiraling outward toward? Like, what are we exiting to? What is the kind of bigger mission here? And because I also think that what I've described in the last slides is a kind of mechanism of exit, like from the surveillance order. And I do think anonymity is a kind of exit, or enables a kind of exit. But so why are we exiting, and where are we exiting to? To answer those kind of questions, it's very helpful to look at philosophy. So I will briefly touch on two philosophers now. Firstly, I will talk about Nietzsche. So Nietzsche says something very good, I think, where he basically talks about what he calls master-slave morality. And this is basically, you have masters and slaves, and the master is the one who's like creating values and imposing them on the slave. And so the slave is like subject to the values of the master. And what ends up happening is the thing that Nietzsche warns about is that the slave wants to cast away the master. And to do this, it doesn't, in doing this, it doesn't transcend the values of the master that have been imposed onto it. So the slave is simply kind of flips the master morality and creates what Nietzsche calls slave morality, which is an inverted form of the master's morality that has been imposed onto the slave. But through this process of inversion, the slave hasn't fully exited the master-slave dynamic. He's still echoing or reflecting the values of the slave, of the master. So Nietzsche says, like, basically, to actually transcend this dialectic, to move beyond the master and the slave, to be neither master nor slave, we have to do what he calls genealogy, which is a fancy word for like analyzing things carefully. He sees things in terms of forces. So the world is like full of different forces that are influencing each other in different ways. And so the genealogist, or the philosopher of the future, he also calls it, must study these forces, try to understand their origins, try to understand how they interact with other forces. And through this process of like building a complete understanding of the different dynamics at work, we can try, or like at least struggle to transcend this master-slave dialectic. So Öcalan, who's another philosopher and also revolutionary, who's very inspiring to us at Darkfy, says something kind of similar, where he basically says that the morals of society have been captured by the state. So they've basically been, the state is like suppressing what Öcalan calls moral and political society. So similar to this kind of master-slave relation, the society needs to transcend this by creating new values, and in a way, like Nietzschean way, becoming philosophers of the future. So Öcalan, he provides some concepts that help consider this kind of process of regenerating moral and political society and decoupling from the state. So these are some Kurdish words on the left that I think encapsulate quite nicely a few important aspects of Öcalan's thought. So first is huenazin, which means know thyself or self-knowledge. So this is a really important process, not just for Öcalan, but in the movements that he has inspired as well, to build a knowledge of yourself, but also the kind of the society in which you are constituted. So looking at what are the formative myths that your society has emerged from. What are the society's histories, and trying to build that historical kind of analysis and that self-awareness that is not just an individual kind of self-knowledge, but also one that is shared among the society. Hui Paristin, we've kind of discussed this, is self-defense. So that means self-defense, not just in the kind of obvious way of like weapons, but like weapons are a part of it, but also more thinking about self-defense in a more expanded form. So that includes like things like cultural self-defense, protecting the language of the people, and etc. And Darkfy and encryption, anonymity more broadly, can be seen as this kind of defensive tool that falls within that category. Finally, then, Quaibun is another concept that I think is really important. That word has two meanings, or at least two meanings, possibly three or more. It simultaneously means both self-being and self-becoming, and its kind of non-literal meaning is autonomy. So these other two things that we just spoke about are kind of elements that advance the autonomy of a society. So it's by articulating that moral and politics, and that a society achieves a state of autonomy, and with the assistance of these techniques like Hui Paristin and Hui Nazin, self-defense and self-knowledge. So this is another beautiful image from our designer. This brings us to a pattern that I really like within science fiction movies. So I watch a lot of sci-fi, and one of the things that comes across in a lot of sci-fi films is this moment of contact between a civilization that exists and something entirely new and alien and outside the frame of reference of that civilization that completely transforms the horizons of the possible. So an example of this, there's many of these such examples, but one example is The Expanse. So if anyone has seen it, there's the discovery right at the beginning. It's kind of like a society which is not that different to ours, or like it's familiar in a way, not that far in the future, but then the society makes contact with this ring, which is like some kind of portal to a much larger, many other universes. And so really it's about, the series is about the contact of that civilization with this, like something that is just going to completely change the horizon of the possible. So it's this kind of transformative contact which permanently reconfigures the horizon of the possible. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that we're undergoing a similar kind of transformative contact now with the advances in anonymous technologies. So it says techniques at the end. So that's also why I would say anonymous engineering, which is a kind of key concept in DarkFi, which we will discuss, is xenotechnics. Xeno means alien, so it's like alien techniques, something radically other and radically external that is reconfiguring the horizons of possible. Oh, nice, yes. So that's a little bit better. We can see a little bit more.
Sono quelle in alto che sono così.
I would like to start from the beginning.
You can start it again.
Oh yeah, problem C diagnostic. Oops.
So we learn a new words, many new words.
New words.
Yeah.
It doesn't exit? No. Okay. No worries.
Let's keep it.
It's fine. Those ones are not that bad. Okay. So yes, the transformative contact. So finally, am I also in the way? Finally, we get onto the topic of DarkFi. So DarkFi, simply put, is a layer 1 that enables anonymous engineering. So anonymous engineering is a concept that is a new concept which we're incubating in DarkFi. So kind of the simplest way of thinking about it is it's the kind of new art of developing anonymous applications using like all means necessary or available. So within cryptography there are like many different tricks that we can use to hide information, and we basically in DarkFi we're trying to create an interface that allows developers to incorporate different tricks and to build complex applications. And so zero knowledge is an important element of this. It's how we achieve, for example, transaction anonymity. But it's not just zero knowledge. So we actually have a general purpose toolkit that allows us to create these anonymous applications, including things like multi-party computation, homomorphic encryption, Pedersen commitments, etc. So it's about assembling these techniques to create things that are the most featureful and kind of advanced, extendable possible. So the current status of the project is testnet. It's an alpha testnet. It's our first testnet. And on the testnet we have running a anonymous proof of stake based on Ouroboros Cryptosinus, a general purpose smart contract infrastructure that allows us to create these complex on-chain protocols, and also we have a couple of apps already working. So we have an anonymous DAO, which is actually the world's first fully anonymous DAO. So that's does everyone know what a DAO is actually?
Yes, I mean, we even make a meeting about that.
Oh, nice.
In our, I don't know the other people, maybe I'm talking by myself, I don't know. La DAO sapete che cos'è, no? Vabbè.
Well, that's brilliant. So a DAO, in the way that we've kind of interpreted it, because there's different interpretations of what a DAO is a collectively managed treasury that's like on-chain. So we've made a form of that which is anonymous, where the treasury is anonymous, the money itself is hidden, and the participants are anonymous, and all the activity of the DAO, everything it does, is also anonymous. So it's a fully anonymous DAO. We also have a OTC tool, which is like atomic swaps, which Daniela mentioned in the presentation also. But it's peer-to-peer, it's not like a Uniswap. That's like a next step. We have anonymous transactions, we have anonymous staking using this Ouroboros Cryptonis, and we have a IRC client, a peer-to-peer IRC protocol, which allows us to have anonymous communication as developers. But I will speak a little bit more about that as well. In terms of DarkFi, I'll explain a little bit technically. I'm also aware that I spent like zero time talking about LunarPunk in relation to other punks, but we'll hopefully get to that in the questions. But so DarkFi, every node on the network is both a prover and a verifier. So this is like a full node, they do both roles. And what the prover does is basically has the private information and it creates the anonymous transaction with inputting this data, which is like local and anonymous in terms of the network. That's then broadcasted and anonymized and broadcasted. And the verifier then is like parsing this transaction, verifying all the crypto, like the ZK stuff that's in there, and the signatures, any other anonymous stuff, and then it transitions the blockchain to the next state. So this is the kind of the center of how DarkFi achieves general purpose programmability. So transactions on DarkFi, unlike on Bitcoin, where you've just got like inputs and outputs, on DarkFi you can have these function call data, basically. So you can chain function calls together, which means you can do sophisticated on-chain logic on DarkFi. And so that call data that you can create, that you can chain inside transactions, is just arbitrary data defined by smart contracts. So those smart contracts can contain ZK proofs, that's a big important component, but also other tricks, the signature schemes, commitments, etc. And in the future, we will extend this further. It's worth mentioning that DarkFi, currently it's on the alpha testnet. This version of DarkFi is like the simplest version that we could build. And the goal is just to stabilize that current version, but keep it roughly the same, and then ship the mainnet. After the mainnet, we will start enhancing the functionality. But for now, like this is the most basic viable version of DarkFi. So we have these on-chain. We can build on-chain protocols and other techniques. Okay, so these are the different dimensions or aspects of the smart contract architecture. So on the ZK side, we're using something called Halo 2, which is a form of ZK, for those that are familiar with ZK, that does not require a trusted setup. So it makes it a more trustless form of ZK. On the ZK side, we have a virtual machine as like a ZK VM, which is for generating the circuits. And we also have a language which allows developers to write in a very simple, human-readable way. It's an assembly language, but it's human-readable. So it allows developers to compose these ZK circuits.
Is an assembly language? Assembly. Readable by?
Human-readable assembly, yeah.
Wow.
Yes. I can, after, on the internet, I can show an example. Actually, I think I have an example in the next slide. So we combine, that's like the ZK layer, and we combine that with a WASM layer, which is the smart contracts. So the WASM smart contracts, they include this SDK, software development toolkit, which allows developers to access the ZK proofs and other things, signatures, elliptic curves, commitments, etc. So this is kind of where I said, like, anonymous engineering. This is like the, practically speaking, how that is enabled, and that's inside WASM and makes use of this ZK aspect as well. So, this is an example of some function calls that we have on DarkFi. This is like the money contract I mentioned we have the wasn't smart contracts. So these are different functionalities contained within the money contract. You've got transfer, OTC, staking and unstaking. So these enable some of the applications that I described early on. And so these function calls make use of ZK proofs under the hood, as well as other techniques, commitments, etc. Then, like on the DAO side, I'm going to talk a little bit more about money and DAO contracts and how they actually work. But yeah, so these are some DAO function calls. These are basically the only 4 function calls that we have on the DAO. It's like creating DAOs, making a proposal to a DAO, voting on that proposal, and executing the proposal, which anyone with the access to the DAO private key can call that exec function. And what's interesting about this DAO is that if you own the private key, you can't spend the money. You have to have others vote using the governance token in order to spend the money. So there's an interesting kind of disintermediation of like custody and authority of spending the funds. Okay, so this is the anonymous transactions. So we just like kind of briefly, I'm not sure on how long you guys want to spend on this, but we can come back to it if you have any questions. But DarkFi is similar to Bitcoin in that there are inputs and outputs. It's a UTXO model. So that's different to something like Ethereum, which is based on accounts where you just have like the one address or the public key, and then inside of there you have everything. Bitcoin, the UTXO model, is a little bit trickier. That's why also it was originally believed to be somewhat anonymous, but it's now we've discovered later that actually it's really not. It's highly traceable through these outputs. So on DarkFi, we have adopted something that is also used in Zcash called the sapling payment scheme, but we have made it like part of a smart contract interaction. So we've kind of mapped it onto this smart contract infrastructure. On DarkFi, inputs contain something called a burn proof, and outputs contain a mint proof. This is how we achieve unlinkability between transactions. Because when you are, this is an example, when you are sending tokens, you are first burning the tokens that you own and also minting new ones. Those new ones are minted anonymously in the wallet of the recipient. So the kind of intuition for this, it's a protocol again which is used by Zcash, which involves it's actually this here. So what we see here is oh no, it's not. It's kind of similar to our assembly language, but it's not our assembly language. So it's more like pseudocode. So yeah, this is the protocol in a simplified state. It's deterministic, and the way that it works is it's not possible to spend the same coin twice. So it has double spend protection through this deterministic and anonymous protocol involving like the minting of or the creation of secret values. So you can see here it's like in the mint you create a random S, then you create a C, which is a hash of S, and you broadcast C. And in the next step, the burn step, you actually reveal that secret value S. And that's what we call burning, and that's also how you make that coin void and you're not able to use it again. So that's a very, very kind of quick, high-level version of what goes on in the transactions. This is the DAO. So there so there are in the ZK contracts that define the DAO. There are these several constraints that you set when you create a DAO. So when you're creating a DAO on DarkFi, you decide on something called a proposer limit. So that basically means if someone's going to make a proposal to this DAO to spend money, they must have a minimum amount of governance tokens to do that. So this proposer limit defines that minimum threshold of governance tokens to propose a vote. Quorum then means what are the total amount of tokens that must be committed on this vote for it to be considered a valid vote. So, for example, if you have a vote that you think is particularly important, you might want to have 90% of all tokens saved on the vote. Might be a bit tricky, but, for example, approval ratio then just says what is the ratio of yes to no votes for this proposal to pass. So you say it has to be 50%, 55%, has to be, etc., 70%. And so that's when you mint a DAO. Remember we spoke about these kind of like arbitrary transactions with extendable function calls. You mint a DAO which contains several attributes that are defined here. Someone at some point makes a proposal. The proposal basically says send a certain number of tokens from the treasury to a public key defined in the proposal. And this is anonymous publicly. Then, that proposal is submitted, people vote on the proposal, and then someone calls exec, which exec basically goes through these constraints and says, okay, does it match the proposal limit? Does it pass the quorum? Approval ratio? Check, check, check. And then if everything passes, send the money. So what's interesting about this is that it can also be used as part of like a complex on-chain protocol. Something that we've seen in, for example, Olympus there is like this notion of a protocol owns liquidity. So this enables a form of anonymous protocol owned liquidity, which is quite interesting. So then, back to the kind of stepping back to DarkFi. This is a diagram of our peer-to-peer network. So we have a really nice peer-to-peer network which is highly modular and extendable, and it's been built in such a way that it's very easy to create peer-to-peer apps and attach them to this network. So we have several apps already using this network, which I will discuss, including the anonymous chat, the anonymous task management system, and a prototype anonymous wiki. And we also want to deploy an anonymous Git backend so that anyone can contribute to the project in a way that's fully anonymous and deniable. So this is part of the effort to create an anti-fragile community and to protect both the developers working on DarkFi and also the user base. And so, we've built also support already for network level privacy. So we have it working with NIM and with Tor. And we're pretty much, I think, the only project that is like as kind of conscious about network level anonymity, which means IP addresses, etc., and other metadata. This is a screenshot of our chat app. So it is a peer-to-peer IRC with enhanced with these anonymity features. So you can do encrypted DMs, you can have encrypted channels as well. And you can use it right now, you can attach any front end, any RSC front end. So it's just like a daemon that you run locally on your computer, and then you can link up any front end to that. So this is WeChat front end. What's really nice as well about this IRC is that you can change your nick as many times as you want, and the messages are unlinkable. So it's a highly anonymous chat. It's probably the most anonymous chat that exists because of this feature that you can change your nick and because of the encrypted channels as well. In terms of DarkFi, then we have a few next steps. Basically, we're at the point with the testnet where we're just polishing, stabilizing. We're trying to reduce the lines of code, simplify the code base. But we're a proof of stake network, which means we have a token. But in the current testnet, that token is just like a dummy value, so it's just like a to-do item basically. So for the next release, it will be our testnet beta. We will have like a fully defined token which has like all of the what do you call it, like issuance defined. That's not defined right now. We also need to finish fees. We haven't fully implemented fees. So that's what we're working on now. Then we're going to deploy that. More or less, once that's deployed, we will start to audit the code base. So every aspect, smart contract, infrastructure, blockchain, all the different aspects will be audited. And once that's finished, we will deploy the mainnet. When the mainnet will be depends on how long the audit takes. And I'm hoping for end of this year, but again, the audit might create new forms of work that we weren't expecting, and that could delay the mainnet release. So, check out our stuff. If you're interested to contribute to Darkfly, we have every Monday at 4 o'clock Central European time, we have a dev chat on our dev channel on IRC. That's definitely the best way to contribute to Darkfly or to engage the community. But if not, like if that's too kind of far from your workflow, you can also follow the Twitter. We have a Telegram as well. All of that information is on our website, where you can also find our documentation, which is very extensive, and obviously our GitHub. So thanks so much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Some question? Scusami? Cosa gli fai? Come vuoi. Abbiamo tirato lungo, sappi, perché io non so neanche se ho memoria.
And remember that we have also then the lovely appetite offered by the
Cosa stai?
No, sì, please.
Cos'è da stare in piedi?
Sì, non c'è.
Per la sedia?
Cosa volete fare allora?
No, I wanted to, following that very challenging project, I think to ask you both one fundamental question, that is how this project is going to be challenged by the regulator. Because everything has been really done from the grassroots to protecting the developer, like the new financial activity, financial terrorism task force, guidelines, introduce liability of anti-money laundering check for anyone that may substantially impact the functioning of a DeFi system. So it means that as lead developer may have this role and may be liable by AML. How DeFi protect or aim, not only DeFi, but DeFi is the concept of evolution against this kind of regulatory threats?
Yeah. That's a really good question, and it's obviously something that has been a concern for us for a long time. We've been talking about this, what we call the Reg Fi Dark-Fi split, for years, and it's only really started to escalate in this last year. So it's very much a risk, and I think the way that we've approached it is like. This technology that we're trying to provide will enable people to, have the option of configuring in their own way and their own kind of interpretation of what information. For example, in the current blockchains, everything is public and it's forced to be public. On DarkFi though, you can optionally reveal information. So it's like kind of, I see it as corrective, because we're moving from a paradigm which is like everything is like forced to be transparent to one where everything is anonymous, and if you want to reveal things, you can. But DARTFi itself is agnostic in the sense of it doesn't care what is revealed on DARTFi. So it is, you could, for example, launch a fully transparent coin on DARTFi if you wanted to, although we don't encourage that, and we're really trying to create this idea of a new design space of what we call anonymous engineering, which is like, what are the apps we can build using ZK and other anonymous technologies that weren't otherwise possible. So I guess, to kind of loop back to the original question, I think the basic idea is that we're providing this software to the world. Obviously it comes with some personal risk, but if we build the project correctly, that irrespective of what happens to the people who are publicly associated with the project, the software will still continue and the community will continue to exist. So obviously those who are publicly associated are, and like any kind of especially in the beginning, we're very vulnerable. So I very much expect that there will be regulatory pressure on those earlier aspects of DARTFi. But what's kind of crucial is that we make it so that those regulatory pressures on individuals associated with DARTFi don't translate to regulatory pressure on the actual technology. So that's where we're providing this software. We hope that once we reach mainnet, it will be possible for people, developers and users, to contribute in a way that is deniable. So that's like a little bit of a roundabout way of answering your question.
You, as an early historical Bitcoiner, how do you see the relationship and the coexistence in the long term of Bitcoin, that's basically where we all mostly started, and all the new generation of darknet, privacy coin related?
Yeah, basically we saw this already in the past, and I want to put what Rose was saying about own regulations and stuff like this. That is historic dispatch from the FBI, because in America it was illegal to print currencies. This is the law there. And when they spotted the first miners, then suddenly they reported that they only found computers but no money. Okay, that was because the money it was already in the computers. What happened then that what you cannot stop, you make it legal. Okay, so the government had to accept that they couldn't stop Bitcoin, and so they had to make it legal because there were no other way for them to stop it. Because if they could, they already did. So moving forward with adding more privacy layers, like DARTFi project, this is what is going to happen. So first they will try to stop it, they will try to make it illegal, but they will realize that this is censorship resistant technology, and then they will have to accept no matter what, because it's so we don't care about what they think, because it doesn't matter. This is unstoppable technology, so who cares what they will try to do? At the end, they will need to accept it. Like it already happened in the past of any technology, because whatever you try to demonize, whatever technology, like the wheel, like the fire, like whatever, but if it's a technology and it makes life better, people will adopt it. And if there is a technology that protects your rights, why not? People have to.
Yes, but you know, I've been part of Tor developer community for some years, and within the Tor community and the use of Tor software, anyway you are directly, in the censorship bypass with anonymity resistance, you are anyway enabling people to connect and do what they are already doing today. Within, from my understanding, that's just a question of the scalability and the challenge that it will have. The current cryptocurrencies and blockchain ecosystem are very strongly interconnected. So there are many different kind of atomic swap between different chain systems, between different currencies. The cryptocurrency regulated broker themselves are point of connection and acceptance as a way to onboard users, even though not in the DeFi way we like. And the regulatory pressure is pushing those big gatekeepers. So when DeFi go in mainnet, its main way of users are the regular user. How can I say? What are the risks that any transaction going through an OTC swap, through an anonymous swap with the DeFi will be marked as suspicious, and they will close your account at Coinbase? You see my point?
Yeah.
Because being the more extreme part in terms of data and privacy protection, it could be marked as something that people wish to stay away from.
For sure. So this is why I see like there's this kind of paradox of anonymity on transparent blockchains, where like we saw in the case of Tornado Cash, and because Ethereum is a transparent blockchain, it's very obvious when anonymity is happening. So you can just easily sanction or like try to stop people from accessing those anonymous things, because you know it's like a desert, and like there you can see everything. You have like the height advantage, like you have total visibility, like domination by air. But anyway, so what would be really interesting? So we are building a bridge to Ethereum. We have some MPC on the ETH side. So that could like potentially anonymize the entry on Ethereum. But I think what would be a really interesting goal to achieve that kind of censorship resistance on the entry is also to look into like anonymous deniable bridging. So, for example, building an atomic swap with Monero and Zcash. We can't build fully fledged bridges because they don't have smart contract support. But we can build atomic swaps. And maybe, probably. And then on the ETH side, there are also anonymity primitives on Ethereum that are being built. Aztec is one of them. So we might be able to, for example, bridge to Aztec. Would be another interesting anonymous bridge, like undetectable bridge. But also, you know, I kind of touched on in the last answer, but I don't think I explained it well. But like when I spoke about transparency on DeFi. You know, I think what is really interesting is if people can define their own kind of morality in terms of like who they want to transact with, etc. So like I think the base layer in DeFi itself should remain indifferent wherever possible. But you could have applications built on DeFi that discriminate between. Discriminate in terms of like what funds they want to allow to access, for example. So like a big thing now on Ethereum is like someone redeployed Tornado Cash on Optimism, and they have a thing where you can configure what funds you mix with, so you can like opt out of mixing with like wallets that have been involved in like large scale hacks and etc. So I think like this is a kind of form of self-regulation that has its own kind of problematics, but is also interesting in terms of like how do we give communities the tools to actually determine like their own morals when it comes to like blockchain, and like so that if there's a desire for something, not mix with like for example the way that like you might differ from US sanctions, which says like okay, Iranian people can't use this thing. Like the blockchain version would be like, no problem with Iranians, but we don't want to have funds coming from large-scale hacks. I don't know. It's an example. But DARPA itself doesn't discriminate between funds. But you know, there are technical ways you could imagine that you could be discriminated from. Yeah.
So, because our appetizer offered by Copernicani is waiting for us,
maybe we can ask.
C'è una question?
Sì.
No, there is a question, some question. Well, I have a question because when you talk about illegally, are you sure it's illegal? The Bitcoin is
Bitcoin is fully regulated.
Ah, ok. Allora, before tu parlavi che era illegale.
Sì, c'è una legge americana che dice che non si può stampare moneta nel territorio americano. Quando furono avvisati che c'era qualcuno che stava
Sì, no, questo l'abbiamo
Bitcoin,
sentito. Sì, no.
Quindi ovviamente l'FBI ha applicato la norma, quindi ha mandato la SWAT, hanno fatto irruzione cercando queste monete che stavano stampando, però hanno dichiarato non abbiamo trovato monete, c'erano solo computer, no? Quindi poi quando hanno imparato col tempo che erano nei computer le monete, hanno dovuto anche ricredersi sul fatto che non si poteva stampare monete in quanto la moneta elettronica, la moneta digitale è un qualcosa di nuovo che non possiamo fermare dal punto di vista legale, non potevamo fermarla, e allora l'hanno dovuta regolamentare, l'hanno dovuta accettare.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. It was just also, I just wanted to clarify something on something I just said, which was, I realized something I said was kind of ambiguous because I was talking about how you could hypothetically have communities choose which funds, like, not to mix with, etc. That couldn't happen on DarkFi because of the fact that everything is anonymous, so there's no way to distinguish between different kinds of activity on DarkFi. The only place it could happen would be on Ethereum. So you could have, like, for example, you could have your community may decide to deploy a bridge which is not mixing with, funds that are associated with hacks or something. But it couldn't happen inside of DarkFi unless there was transparent activity happening, which, by default, there's not. Which is not to clarify.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess that we are ready for our appetizer, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We have something else to do? No, anche tu anche lui. Sì, okay. It's okay. Okay, thank you very much. Bye bye. I close.
Drinks.
Okay.